Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, 2 5-star reads. It's my weekly wrap-up. And yes, before we start, I am aware of the irony of starting a video by saying I was going to talk about 2 5-star reads a week or two after putting up a video saying I don't think we should be rating books anymore. But I couldn't think of another succinct way to express my admiration for these books. So maybe that's why star ratings are useful sometimes. So yes, 7 books in total read this week, 2 of which were truly exceptional. So I will talk about all 7 of those books. That takes me to 53 books in total for my second Read What You Own challenge, where I'm reading 100 books I already own before buying any new ones. So a few things I read this week didn't count towards that because I got them since I started that challenge. But yeah, it's been a really good reading week overall. There was at least one dud this week, but generally speaking, a really good reading week. So I'll talk about the books, and then as usual, we'll talk about what's been on the channel and what's coming on the channel in the week ahead. So let's get on with the books then. So the first book then, definitely not a 5-star read. And this is a book I was reading when I made this video last week, so I did talk about it briefly then. So this was Dirty Weekend by Helen Zahavi. So this is a British kind of literary, is it a crime novel? It's not really a crime novel, like a piece of literary fiction that came out in the early 90s that was really big when it came out. Everyone was talking about this book. I think partly that may be because it came out the same year as American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis, which again everyone was talking about. And this is similar-ish in that it features a central character who is murderous, who is, going around murdering people. And it is, kind of darkly comic in the same way that American Psycho is. Unlike American Psycho, which is, still a book that I think is at least talked about, if not necessarily highly regarded. I think different people have different opinions of American Psycho. Unlike American Psycho, Dirty Weekend seems to have pretty much disappeared from the public consciousness, despite, making a splash when it came out. And having reread it, I can see why. It has dated very, very badly. So it's a book about a woman in Brighton, so the next town along to where I live, or the nearest city to me, rather. And she is basically just fed up with men being arseholes, men being kind of predatory. And she goes on a killing spree, basically, off the back of that. So you can see why people were intrigued by the concept when it came out. And there are some scenes in this book that I thought there were a couple of scenes that were really, really well done. And it does a reasonable job of kind of presenting a recognisable version of Brighton. It did. I could tell it was set in Brighton, and it captured some of the vibe of Brighton as a city. Where it lets itself down is the narrator is like really kind of present, and he's also quite annoying in my experience, or in my opinion. So I didn't enjoy the style in which it was written. And it's also, for a book that kind of presented itself when it came out as kind of a feminist kind of radical work of fiction, it's packed with kind of like casual racism and homophobia and things like that, which really took away from the overall message. So definitely an interesting book, and I'm glad I reread it. But yeah, not a great read in my opinion. I read that for Horror Mayhem. So the first week of Horror Mayhem was like read a local book, and this is kind of horror adjacent, I would say. So I guess I could take that for Horror Mayhem, even though it wasn't as much of a horror novel as I remembered it being. After that, then, one of the 5-star books, and there is a similarity between these 2 5-star books, which I'll talk about when I've talked about both of them. So the first of them was I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman, which I read for MJ from Reading This Life's Patreon book club. So it was the pick for that book club this month. This was phenomenal. This was a book I'd heard a few people talk about on BookTube and wanted to read anyway. So when the opportunity came up to read it for MJ's book club as part of that, I thought I'd definitely give it a try. I loved it. This was a really excellent book. And I don't want to say too much about it because it's a book you kind of need to experience, and I really wouldn't want to spoil it. But essentially, the concept is there is a bunker which has, I think it's 40 women in it. And they are guarded by like men who kind of work in shifts outside the kind of gate that closes off the bunker, who they never really have any communication with. The narrator of the book is a young woman who has no name. So when everyone moved into the bunker, she was so young that she hadn't been named. And whilst the other female characters in the book do have names, she doesn't. So she's the narrator. She's kind of 15 or 16 at the start of the book, that kind of age. And it's about her trying to understand the world outside the bunker, you know, what it is, trying to understand what it means to be a woman, trying to understand, you know, what it is to be human, what it is to grow up and things like that. The plot does, you know, move on from there. But I don't want to go into that because I think it would spoil the book. But I really, really thought this was an excellent book. Really moving, really thoughtful. You know, it's not a very long book, so it's quite a quick read, but just wonderful. A really, really wonderful book. And the narrator's voice is a really engaging and interesting voice. I had a great time with this book. I can't recommend it highly enough. I will be doing a review of it, which will go up probably this week. After that then, I read Spencer Edwards' Emperor of the Galaxy by Alex Pryor. So very, very different, but a fun read. So this is a British YA sci-fi novel about an ordinary teenage boy in the UK who gets picked at random basically to be Emperor of the Galaxy and has to go on kind of galactic adventures as a result of that. So just fun, basically. As you can tell from the cover and from that synopsis, it's just a fun book. It is packed with, you know, kind of action. There's a lot of humour in it. He does a really good job, Alex Pryor, of balancing the kind of sci-fi elements with the ordinary elements. And that's something like the everyday kind of elements, I guess. So that's something I always enjoy in books like this, where you've got a character who is flitting between kind of their normal life and you know, some kind of fantastical experience or adventure. So you have Spencer, you know, he has like this wormhole that he can use to get between the spaceship that he has as Emperor of the Galaxy and his bedroom, but he has to go back to his bedroom and do homework and stuff like that. So just entertaining and fun. If you like reading, you know, this kind of light sci-fi, I'd recommend it. If you've got a young person in your life who you think might enjoy it, I would recommend it as well. It was a fun read. After that then, another book that was sent to me by the author, as the Spencer Edwards book was. So this is The End by Kaleigh Dobbs, whose channel you can find on YouTube as Happy Goat Horror. So she does, you know, kind of reviews and things like that, and has a website where she does reviews as well. So this is one of these lovely Black Shuck Shadows little editions. I've got another one of them from another author. So a series of, they've done this series of like short story collections. This has, I think, half a dozen, 6 or 7 short stories in it. Yeah, six short stories in it. All, you know, quite short, as you can tell, because it's a short book, but all fun. So it turned out, I didn't realise this when I picked this up, but I've actually read a previous book by Kaleigh Dobbs, which was published under her maiden name. That book was called Corpsing, which again was a, you know, short story collection of horror short stories, all of which have a kind of comic bent to them, as the stories in this do. So really entertaining. She's got a nice kind of lightness of touch and really blends kind of intriguing horror elements well with bits of humour. And also, like the Spencer Edwards book, this is a book that is kind of recognisably British. So there's a nice kind of sense of place to it. It felt kind of almost cosy in a way to me, because of that sense of Britishness. So I really enjoyed this, and again, you know, definitely recommend it. After that then, another book I read for Horror Mayhem, as indeed I read The End for Horror Mayhem. So this was The Razer of Gales by Hideyuki Kikuchi, which is the second of the Vampire Hunter D light novels. So again, this was a fun read. This is the Vampire Hunter D books are kind of, you know, kind of pulpy sci-fi fantasy adventures with, you know, a strong horror element to them as well. I read it for the post-apocalyptic prompt on the Horror Mayhem bingo card. It definitely works for that. So set in a far, far future, like the year 5000 or something like that, I think it is, where like humanity has reverted to a kind of feudal medieval kind of society. There are vampires around, and there are also people who are half vampire, half human, and Vampire Hunter D is one of those people. So he goes around, you know, kind of doing missions and stuff like that, and hunting down vampires and things. What you get that's really interesting is this mix of kind of like this kind of medieval society with kind of technology stuff that's kind of hung around from the, you know, before the apocalypse. So a really, really fun read, very fast paced, very silly at times, but it's got a nice kind of gothic vibe to it in terms of the kind of melodrama of the battle between vampires and half vampires and humans and things like that. So yeah, just another fun read. After that, then the second of the 5-star reads, and I will talk at the end about why I think this is in some ways similar to I Who Have Never Known Men. So this was a buddy read I did with Alex from the channel The Bookubus. The book is Flicker by Theodore Roscak. So this is a book I had years and years ago and just never got round to reading. I don't know why I picked it up. I don't know if I'd heard about it or I just chanced across it in a like a charity shop or something like that, but I definitely had a copy of it. Alex showed it on her channel a little while ago, and I was like, I remember that book. Let's do it. I said, I'm going to pick up another copy. You've inspired me to pick up a copy of it. And she suggested we do a buddy read, and we did that, and it was great fun. It's been really fun just kind of chatting about the book with her. So this is a book that is basically a conspiracy theory kind of thriller. And indeed, it has multiple similarities to the Da Vinci Code, which came out, I think, 20 years after this book. This book is centred around, so unlike the Da Vinci Code, which is kind of centred around art, I guess, this is centred around cinema. So the central character, John, is a film student at the start and film critic as the book progresses, who becomes obsessed with this German director who moved to Hollywood in kind of the 20s or 30s and started making movies there, called Max Castle. And there is something weird about his films. So whilst his films appear on the surface to be kind of typical Hollywood fare of the 30s, so kind of, you know, kind of horror movies and like noir films and things like that, so kind of typical exploitation cinema, there's something like that feels kind of almost uncanny about them, that feels unsettling about them. And it's about John trying to figure out what that is and why it is. So this is a long book. It's nearly 700 pages long, and it is quite ponderous in terms of its unravelling of that plot. It takes a long time to tell you its story, but the reason it takes a long time to tell you its story is absolutely packed with detail about cinema and the history of cinema and Hollywood in particular. And I found myself quite often like pausing reading it to go and look up a film that had been mentioned. There's this like a kind of Saturday Morning Pictures serial that's mentioned called Jungle Girl, which I managed to find on YouTube and you know, watched a few bits of. So it's really packed with like factual information about Hollywood and real directors and real actors and things like that, as well as Max Castle and a kind of small cast of fictional actors and other people in the film industry who come up as the book progresses. I love this book. I really, really thought this was excellent. I thought he did a really good job of like building the character. The characters in this book were really interesting. The detail about cinema I found really, really interesting, and it definitely took me back to my days as a film student. And the ending of this book was wonderful. I absolutely loved the ending. So if you like the sound of that, I definitely recommend this book. I am going to do a full review of it, but that will probably be like next week, so Thursday week. But yeah, I really thought this was excellent. And the similarity then between this and I Who Have Never Known Men is both of them, you could write a summary of what the book is about that would make it sound like a kind of cheesy throwaway, you know, kind of throwaway piece of entertainment. So, you know, I Who Have Never Known Men, that description, there's a load of women in a bunker. The central character is a teenage girl. And it's about her, you know, trying to figure out what's going on in the world and kind of coming of age. That sounds to me like the description of a YA, you know, a YA book like The Hunger Games or something like that. There's definitely a similarity there. Whereas this, you know, is a conspiracy thriller about spooky movies that's kind of a bit like the Da Vinci Code. So again, it feels like a, you know, a kind of throwaway kind of fun read. But both of these books have an enormous depth to them, an enormous thoughtfulness about like what it is to be human, really. And I thought both of them were truly, truly excellent and used their intriguing plots to kind of get you hooked and pull you through the story, but give you so much more on top of that. So I really thought both this and I Have Never Known Men were really excellent books, to the extent that I need to go back and look at my 50 books, the best 50 books from the last 50 years list that I came up with the other day, and see if I now think these are the best books for their years. So yes, anyway, right, the final book I read then this week, which I just finished this morning, was The Haunting of Ashburn House by Darcy. So this is kind of the opposite of those two books, in that this is a book that's got that kind of light entertainment, style plot. So this is a book about a young woman who inherits this spooky house from her aunt who's died, who moves there, and spooky stuff happens basically. What The Haunting of Ashburn House fails to do is an entertaining read. I enjoyed it. It's fun. It's spooky. It's got some kind of interesting characters, some decent spooky scenes and things like that. But it has absolutely no depth to it at all, which isn't necessarily criticism. I read books like that all the time, but this is a book that left like zero impression on me. I was thinking of like the analogy of, if you think about when it's just snowed and you look out the window and you've got this kind of blanket of pure white, untrodden snow. Something like Flicker or I Who Have Never Known Men, after reading those books, my brain was, that snow would be just completely disrupted, just all over the place, because both those books I just couldn't stop thinking about once I'd finished them. The Haunting of Ashburn House, on the other hand, that snow is just completely undisturbed. This is a book that kind of just skimmed across my brain as I was reading it. So a fun read, definitely, but no depth, no lasting impact at all. So in terms of what I'm currently reading then, currently reading Road of Bones by Christopher Golden. So I started listening to the audiobook of that this morning rather. So this is this month's pick for my Patreon and channel members book club. So a few people have finished it and enjoyed it. I'm really enjoying it so far. So I'm 2 chapters in. It's fast paced, it's light, it's entertaining, it's a little bit spooky. It's kind of like, in some ways, like The Haunting of Ashburn House, in that it's very, very light and surfacey. But it is enjoyable, and I'm enjoying the 2 central characters. So yeah, that's what I'm currently reading. And then also started this morning a book that I've wanted to read for ages. And one of my subscribers, Eerie, pointed out in a comment on another video on YouTube. So Eerie is a great commenter across kind of BookTube. He pointed out on in a comment on a video that Andrew from It Came From The Page put up about like the problem with archiving of books. So the fact that there are so many books that are just lost, and it's they're not digitally archived, and they're out of print, and it's secondhand copies of them can be super expensive. So one book that is true for is a book called Eat Them Alive by an author called Pierce Nace, which is like I think it's like an early 80s animal attacks type book about killer insects. And it's one of those books that was featured, I think, in the Grady Hendrix book, Paperbacks from Hell, and the price of it has skyrocketed. So it's like, £100 a copy, which for, a throwaway kind of horror novel, which isn't even supposed to be that great, is a lot of money. Eerie pointed out in this comment that that book is now available on archive.org. So archive.org, if you don't know, is a site that's trying to kind of digitally archive both stuff on the internet, but also books. And every so often, they've got a deal going with some libraries and things like that, and they add new books and things like that, and old videos and that kind of thing. So this is a book that is now available on archive.org. It is literally like photographs someone has taken of the book. So you get bits where the text is kind of curved like that because of the bend of the page. But it is quite readable. So I'm reading that on my kind of big e-ink tablet. That felt like the appropriate way to read that. So I've just started that. I've only read the first few pages so far, but it's really fun so far. I'll probably get that finished today. Right, that's all the book stuff talked about then. So in terms of channel stuff then, so in the last week or so, you've had my review of Brainworms by Alison Rumford, a very very weird and disgusting body horror book. You've had a book haul video I did with a few different things in it. You've had my April wrap up, so me talking about all the books I read in April. And you had a video rather, where I talked about all the things I always forget to say on the channel, like and subscribe. So all those things I forget to say on the channel, I just did a video with all of those in, which people seem to have quite enjoyed. In the week ahead then, I'm going to do a video about, can I give up my Kindle? So I've been thinking about this recently, and thinking about how central Amazon is to all of our lives, to my life in particular. And I wondered, could I give up using my Kindle completely? So I'm not saying I'm going to give up reading ebooks, definitely, because a lot of the books I've read this week I've read digitally, but can I give up using the Kindle ecosystem? So we will see. I'm gonna do an experiment over the next month or so and see how I go on with that. So I'm going to do a video tomorrow to kind of launch that. I've got an announcement video for an event taking place in June. You can probably get, I'm not going to say what it is, but you can probably guess what it is, so that'll be going up. I've got a video I've done about comics that people might want to read for Horror Mayhem, so a few kind of horror comic recommendations. And then, as I said, I'm going to do a review of I Who Have Never Known Men as well. So that's what you can expect to see on the channel in the next week. Anyway, I'll leave it there. Hope you've all had good reading weeks. Let me know in the comments what you've been reading. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.